Welcome to the SEMA show, Collision Repair Stage 2022. My name is Brian Wasson. I have Lori Barrington and Tom McFinch. Kind of give us backgrounds a little bit. What I do for iCar is the management of delivery of our program. So we're going to be covering equipment needs. Let's go down the line so we can get to know the other great iCar folks we have. Lori?
Hi, Lori Barrington. I'm Vice President of the iCar delivery team. So me and my team work with all of the great instructors that we have and assessors throughout the country and delivering the great training materials that we have.
Thank you, Lori, very much. Tom McFinch. I am the South Central Region Principal of Business Development. I work with the shops, the career technical education schools, and talk about what their needs are, what we can do to help support them through the efforts of iCar and education, and really help work with them that they know what they need to do to make a complete, safe, quality repair.
Thank you very much. So what are we going to be talking about this short little 30 minutes? iCar equipment needs and shops to support training and why. So we're going to be sharing the, what are the equipment needs for iCar training? Why do you need them? And how do we verify it? So let's get into it. So what is needed? Well, something to remember is on our website, all the information there is, but there's a few key things I want to point out to you. You'll see a link here of how you can get to what we call the Equipment Facility Preparation Checklist. It's essentially just a giant checklist of large pieces of equipment, like a welder, for example, and small, like a pair of ice grips. So it's an all-encompassing list of materials for each course. Each course has very specific requirements. And when you go in there, you'll see something like this, and this is more of just like a condensed version of it. And it's not an all-encompassing list, but it gives you the big items, like how many welders do I need if I have 6 students? What kind of welder do I need? But something to remember is we're a neutral organization, so we're not going to tell you need XYZ welder. We're going to tell you your welder needs to meet specific specifications. And in the welding training certification part, it would be an amp requirement or something similar of that nature. So the point is, you look through the information. We don't expect you to know every bit and piece, but you're going to know majority of it. And then when you have questions or you need to know more, you can always contact the customer care department. Tom, what kind of questions do you get from customers on equipment needed for courses?
A lot of times we get questions regarding why do I have to have a specific type of welder, right? Why can't I just use whatever welder I want to use in my shop? And we think about it, it really goes back to what our OEM partners recommend. I mean, they are the ones that set the standards for what type of equipment they need. And so that's where the confusion comes in. A lot of times they may not be 100% dialed in on what that OEM wants. And they may not be following those repair procedures according to the manufacturer because they're not using that proper equipment. I think that's really the message that we're trying to get out is what equipment's needed, and we make sure that we are following the proper equipment usages so that we can make a complete, safe, quality repair following those OEM repair procedures.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Tom. And great segue, by the way, because it leads into my next slide. Lori, would you like to talk more about why is needed and kind of expand on what Tom was talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's dead on. He kind of stole my thunder, but hey, that's okay. So I always refer back to the iCar vision statement, right? Because that's really our guiding principles on everything we do with our curriculum and for the industry. And it's about making sure that every person in the collision repair industry has the necessary information, knowledge, and skills required to perform that complete, safe, quality repair for the ultimate benefit of the consumer, right? And training is a very important piece in that, but the equipment is the other important piece in that, along with the quality technician, right? So without all three of those things, really achieving that mission statement or that vision statement is next to impossible. And not only does iCar follow that vision, obviously, but we're hoping that shops and technicians keep that in the back of their mind too when they're looking at these vehicles and trying to figure out that repair plan and what equipment they need and do they have the right training to do that. And the equipment that we require for our training events, it's not something we made up, as Tom described earlier. That identification really starts early on when we are gathering research and working with our OE partners. When we're researching different repair processes and how we can develop training to support that activity, and we're looking across all OEs or all equipment makers or whatever piece of tool or equipment we're talking about. But we establish that base minimum, very minimum requirements that would be successful in using that tool on that repair process. So it's a combination of all the information that we research and gather from various individuals and companies throughout the inter-industry, and then that establishes our minimum, like I said. Now, obviously, there's collision repair networks, OE networks that require equipment, and there a lot of cases that equipment exceeds our bare minimum, right, for equipment. But it's all about making sure that you have the right training and you're applying that training using the right pieces of equipment, and that's going to support that proper repair.
Yeah, and going back to what you were talking about, the bare minimum of specifications, when we go through that research, you are right. When you start looking at specific OEs that require, and you compare it to the specifications that we have, you will find that it either meets or exceeds. And in most cases, when you start looking at a specific OE, it exceeds our specifications. And that's because it's a culmination of all manufacturers, because we're a neutral organization. So, like you said, bare minimum, but odds are if you get that one, it's probably going to exceed it.
Yeah, so it's a little scary because this is the number one question and concern that we get from customers, right? It's like, oh, you guys are requiring, this type of, not this type, but this spec on an aluminum welder, and my welder doesn't meet that spec. That's the one I'm using in the shop every day. That might be a problem, right?
Yeah, you got that right. Yep.
Well, the other odd thing is a lot of times we get in situations where an equipment requirement is based on the metallurgy that the OEMs use in the process of steel, right? So not every steel is the same. So the technician can't just make the assumption that the steel is the same on every brand, make, and model throughout the industry. And they have to understand that there are different types of equipment requirements, there are different types of wire requirements, and a lot of different things go into that. And since that technician may not have that knowledge, that's the education that we're really trying to provide through the coursework that we do in those facilities.
I'm going to go a little technical on you, so I must apologize, all right? Have you all ever heard of duty cycle?
Yes.
All right, so we're already on
I have as well.
You have as well, awesome, so we're already up there. What is the amperage requirement for a steel GMA, the welding amperage requirement? Do you know it offhand? If you don't, I won't hold you to it.
No, Brian, I do not know.
You do not. 140 amps, by the way, 140 amps,
Actually,
okay?
I knew that.
So for steel GMA, you got to have a welder that's capable of 140 amps. All right, so what duty cycle is a 140 amp welder? 20%. But what does that mean? So that means that particular welder can weld at 140 amps for 2 minutes, then it has to rest for 8. Now, the average plug weld, what do you think the amperage rating for an average plug weld is? Give you a hint, it's real close to 140.
140?
135, close, 135, that's all right, I'll give you the extra 5. So, you think about that in a repair situation. An average plug weld, 135 amps, right? How many plug welds are needed to put on a frame rail? 20, 30?
However,
There's a lot of them,
requires.
yeah. So how long does it take you to get 2 minutes worth of plug welds, and then that machine's got to sit for 8 minutes? Some things to consider about. So it's, yeah, that spec is the minimum spec, but it's also, in the training, we cover that particular topic. Like your welder has this particular aspect of it, and something you need to keep conscious of. Now, obviously, if they have a welder that exceeds those specifications, then it's not much of an issue. So that's kind of give you a taste of what's covered in the training. Even though it is the minimum specification, in the training that we cover, we also cover, oh yeah, it's down here. Here's the things you need to look out for or compensate for or whatever. Just share information and knowledge.
Well, and the other thing, Brian, is just because the weld looks correct on the surface doesn't mean the penetration has reached the level that it needs to either, correct?
And that is correct. Usually the face doesn't tell you nothing.
Right, so that's why we have a lot of technicians that can make beautiful welds. However, is the penetration there? And if it's not there, what is the net result of poor penetration on the weld?
Well, you have a weak weld, and therefore
Failure.
a particular repair that's not going to perform as expected in its next collision. All right, so let's get into how we verify, how iCar verifies whether the equipment is on site and whether it meets specifications. So we do it a number of different ways. What we do when the shop makes an online request, when they go and request the training, we have a number of links there that's links to the various information that I was just talking about a minute ago. But then in addition, after the request has been put in, it goes over to our scheduling department. And Laura, you work real close with our scheduling department. And what kind of information do the schedulers ask the shops about equipment?
Well, we provide them with information on whatever course the customer is looking to be trained on or trained in. They're asking, how many pieces of it, how many welders do you have, based, depending on how many technicians that they're looking to train at that time, because you want more than one welder if you're going to train 6 technicians, right? Just for efficiency perspective, you don't want technicians standing around during the course, kind of wasting time, right? We want to make sure it's a really efficient training program and training time as well. So yeah, they're going through and they're informing the customer. You need these types of tools on hand. You need extra supplies. You need to make sure you got the right welding wire. All those types of things are covered with the scheduling group.
Yeah, so it's more of like a high level, 15,000 foot, just FYI.
Yeah, the other thing that's important is as we ask for shops to review this facility preparation checklist, right? We want them to treat it as if they were doing a quality control checklist on a repaired vehicle, not pencil whip it like we see so many times. We'll see shops check the box and never bother to check the requirements to find out what they have or don't have, and then there's a level of frustration when we show up to do the event and they're not prepared. And so we would hope that they would actually utilize that checklist and think about it, not just in terms of that welding event, but in terms of the preparation to repair the vehicle, right? Because once a welding event's over, that doesn't repair any vehicles. We're doing the event so they understand what goes into proper repairs. And so there's a good point to think about. If you're a new shop or a young shop, or if you're a new shop manager, look through that list and verify what you have so that you know when you're making those repairs that they are good, safe, quality repairs, and that you do meet that minimum standard according to that checklist.
Yeah, and I think additionally, especially when you're talking to our scheduling after this, and you've looked at this checklist, just raise your hand if something doesn't make sense. What is, a pulse synergic MIG welder? What is that? I don't know what that is. Well, if you don't know what it is, we can probably hook you up with someone that can explain it to you in a very non-technical way. Try to make a very technical subject non-technical. But that's the point I'm trying to drive, is reviewing that checklist beforehand and making sure you have everything. But also, if you don't understand what a particular item is, to ask for help, essentially.
Yeah, and you bring a great point, Brian, because what's really unique and available to a lot of shops that they're not aware of is if they don't know and they don't ask, we can't help them. If they don't know and they do ask, in most cases, we'll either have one of our instructors reach out to verify what that equipment need looks like, what to expect and anticipate before that event so they are prepared, and that instructor can give them more insight into understanding A, the equipment they have, but B, what to expect the day of that event and really know what that's going to look like.
And the challenge is when the instructor calls, they really need to talk to that right person at the shop that understands what that equipment is, what they have, making sure that the equipment is set up properly and that it's actually in working order, because that happens too. There's equipment that sits in the corner and maybe doesn't get used for quite a while and no one's pulled it out for whatever reason, and they got to make sure that it's checked and it's up and running and can support the training.
Yeah, it's we call it, yeah, we got that. Yeah, we got that. But I think another thing when the instructor calls, because it's going down the last 2 bullets here, because they're going to call twice. They're going to call once they get the assignment, and they're going to call right before they get in their car and start driving to the shop. And those are the opportunities. But even then, when the instructor calls, they don't know if it's a good time or not. They don't have a crystal ball and be like, oh, I know that, they have all these customers coming in. So, feel free to tell the instructor, I'm really busy right now. Call back on Tuesday at, I don't know, 4 p.m. and ask for such and such. And they would be happy to call back. But if you just say, I'm busy right now, I can't do anything, and then hang up, well, he's going to call back, and it's probably not going to be a convenient time. Well, is there anything else that you two would like to add as far as how we verify? We try to reach out as much as possible between scheduling and the instructor contacting them. Any other tips, suggestions you could give shops out there to get themselves prepared for training?
The biggest thing I would make sure of is if you're a training manager and you're not as familiar with what equipment your shop has, maybe get your production manager, maybe get your senior technician, or here's a great idea, maybe get the guys that are going to be taking the event to make sure what equipment you have and that equipment does meet the needs and that you have all the equipment. So often I get the question of, why do we have to wear PPE? Why do we have to wear a mask? Why do we have to wear this? Well, it's education and safety protection for the long term, because we don't want to come in and deliver an event and the technicians don't wear the proper equipment, they don't wear the mask, and then they continue to get into that mindset, that cycle of, I no longer need to wear this, I no longer need to wear a mask, and then maybe 10, 12, 15 years down the road, they're all wishing someone would have told them, hey, you need to wear this proper protection equipment so that you don't suffer some long-term illness effects as a result of doing it incorrectly.
Yeah, the instructors do see that a lot out there with, students not having the right PPE. So that is very important. Our instructors may have some extra PPE available to provide to the students, but that's really not their role. The shops really need to have that in place. So that's also part of the checklist and the verification process as well.
Yeah, we always tell the instructors is just like in a paint job, good preparation will make your class go very well. And I think that's also a recommendation for our customers out there is if you take care in your preparation, like talking to the instructor, setting up a conference call with the people that are going to be taking the class, the production manager, and the owner, all talking to the instructor at the same time before the event takes place. Get to what to expect, what you're going to need, what PPE is going to be needed, what's not there. The body man might know, oh yeah, we have that. It's sitting in the corner and it needs these pieces for it to work. No one else knew that one person knew. So there's just things like that. And I think if you treat it more like as you're prepping a car for paint, you're prepping your shop for training. You gotta put all the pieces in place and make sure everything's there, because if you don't have the piece in place on the day, it's not going to turn out well, and there's just no way you can get around it.
Hey, Brian and Tom, I got a question. Based on what you guys see and the feedback that you get, what's probably the number one piece of equipment that shops don't have that they really should?
Oh, yeah, you really put me on the spot, because it's all over the board. I would say the number one piece of equipment, it used to be the spot welder, but we're seeing a lot less of that now. But it's still a comparable steel welder. I mentioned the 140 amp before. A lot of people have them, and then they end up running into problems because they run into overheat problems. And that's something we still see and been seeing it for years, is just old equipment should be retired, in my personal opinion. It is just it's worn its way out through the production facility, and probably needs to be upgraded or taken a look at.
Yeah, I still get a lot of questions regarding squeeze type welders and aluminum panel stations. A lot of shops aren't prepared to make aluminum panel repairs, and so therefore they haven't prepared and purchased the equipment they need. They get frustrated because what we encounter so often are shops want to purchase equipment, do the training, do everything after the substrate has proved itself that it's going to be around a while. I'm pretty confident aluminum's going to be around a while.
I think it might be here for a few more months.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've even had conversations with shops about, I don't make those repairs. I don't work on that type of vehicle. I don't do that. Well, you may not do it today, but there's a great chance that you're going to see more and more of an increase of it as we move forward into the future. I mean, the CAFE standards alone are dictating reduction in weight of vehicles. So reducing the weight of that vehicle, there's only a couple things you can do, right? We're not taking seats out to reduce weight. So we've got to change our substrates. We've got to change how we're designing that vehicle. And a big change we're seeing is aluminum body panels. We never thought, one of the major domestic truck lines was ever going to do aluminum body panels. They even made commercials against it. But now they do it. They have their closure panels in aluminum. But we still get shops that say we don't make those repairs. And I think as we develop and provide this education, it's to train shops for the future and for what is happening today in the vehicle line.
Yeah, for sure. And again, going back to something that I said earlier, you can have the best training, the best technician, but if they're not using OE procedures and they don't have the right equipment in which to work with, we're not going to get a very good quality repair out of that.
You guys hit the nail on the head for me. There's nothing I can add to it. You covered all the topics. Only thing I like to say about the specific of aluminum, I mean, if you compare vehicles of 5 years ago to today, there's not many vehicles I can think of that don't have an aluminum panel somewhere on there. And especially with the part shortage that the industry has been experiencing over this past few years, sometimes you can't get a hood, you can't get a door. And repair is like your only option in some situations. So something to consider, something to think about that, because I've seen this happen where repairable parts are thrown in the bin because of lack of experience and lack of tools and equipment. If you have the tools and equipment and you have the training and you have the knowledge, you can actually probably save that part and repair it instead of replacing it. I used to work as a technician. That was my background, and I always preferred repair over replacing because that was the part that came out of the factory. I know that part's going to fit. I know I don't have to color match it on the other side because it's the part that came with it. Plus, selfishly, it helped me in my wallet too when I repaired it versus replacing it. So things to consider, training is an asset. It's not something that needs to be checked. And I think a lot of the times we get sucked into it where training and equipment needed is a box to check when it really should be, this is an asset to my organization and my shop to essentially elevate me to the next level.
It's a great point.
Yeah, I think if more shops and technicians would think of continuing education as an opportunity to become more efficient with their time and more efficient with repair processes, it would help encourage them to take this training, right? So as we look at what's changed in vehicle repair procedures from 15, 20 years ago when you did plug weld everything back together, and plug welding a quarter panel on took so much longer back then than using a squeeze type welder today, and the efficiencies and all the other variables that go into it. And by learning those techniques and by learning and being developed in those processes, I think these shops can understand that, the technicians can understand it, that by becoming more efficient, you can produce more cars out the door than you ever could before as a result of having good equipment, right? It'd be like me asking you to change the wheel on a car, but you only get a wrench to use to take the lug nuts off. That's not very, it can happen. It's not very efficient.
Wrench too. A crescent wrench, not on.
Yeah, crescent wrench.
Yeah, gonna take you a while.
But I think if shops would, this is my thought, when I look at these events, these welding events, these hands-on events, if shops would prepare their technicians for it and go in with a positive mindset of, let's learn something from this event. Let's don't go in there kicking and screaming and hating the fact you're here. Let's learn something from this event. Let's figure out how knowing this and doing this is going to make you more efficient in your job. And let's prepare for this event as if this were a vehicle you're going to be working on. So if you knew you had a vehicle coming in your repair bay, you aren't going to have to run back and forth 50 times for tools and be efficient with that repair process. You're not going to have to run back trying to find the documents you need. You're not going to have to run back going, where's my welding gloves? Where's my welding helmet? Where's my sleeves? Where's this? Where's that? Where's my respirator? You're going to be prepared for the day we show up. It's going to make a much more seamless event for you. And that the instructor and the student are going to have a much greater time together developing and spending time on actually doing the repair processes and doing the actual work as opposed to chasing things all over the shop.
Yeah, there's one thing that shuts an event down pretty often. It's mainly with the welding, and it's consumables, contact tips, liners, welding wire, bottles of gas. I only got one set of tips or one extra bottle or not even an extra bottle at all. Well, tip gets burned, can't use it anymore, event is done. You can't continue on, and that whole training, everything's just been stopped. So yeah, like I said, good preparation, just making sure your stuff's in order as we go. Well, we're getting to the closing of our little chat here. Are there any closing comments that either of you would like to cover?
Just, going back again to the vision statement, it's what guides us, and we hope that shops and technicians feel the same way and use that as their guiding factor. And it's all about the complete, safe, quality repairs. And the things that you need to do that are the training, the right technicians, skilled technicians, and then obviously the right equipment.
Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate you guys coming out. I appreciate everybody that's going to watch this video, and certainly if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You see our information on the board here.
Well,
We'd love to hear from you.
Except yours, I forgot to.
Yeah,
I forgot
my
to
name
fix
is
it.
First Last. I am the business principal, First Last.
Sorry about that. Forgot to update our slide. As you know, SEMA can get really hectic and really crazy. So his name is not First Last. Tom McFinch is his name. Thank you everyone for participating in our chat here and listening to the information we had, and those people live. Thank you for coming here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.